In Mexico, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador reiterated the request to suspend Ecuador as a member state of the United Nations after the attack of the Mexican embassy in Quito. A UNICEF humanitarian aid convoy was hit by Israel gunfire on its way to northern Gaza to deliver life-saving supplies to children. And Friday marks 1 year since the beginning of the war in which Sudan, which has left the country with millions displaced. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. The President of Mexico, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, reiterated in a press conference the request to suspend Ecuador as a member state of the United Nations after the attack to the embassy in Quito. The President detailed that his government demands reparation of the damage caused by Ecuador. Mexican head of state demands also the suspension of Quito from the United Nations until the emission by Ecuador of a public statement of apology and a non-repetition agreement. López Obrador referred to the lawsuit filed at the CIJ, reflecting the arguments for the transgressions committed against the Vienna Convention, which states the inviolability of diplomatic premises without exceptions.
We have to wait for the International Court of Justice to decide on our claim. And Mr. Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, is right when this is also for the member states of the United Nations organization to decide. So we are going to the Court of Justice, and we are asking for Ecuador to be suspended from the United Nations until it pronounces itself and recognizes that they violated international law and our sovereignty, which is what we want.
The former Vice President of Ecuador, Jorge Glass, denounced that he was mistreated and tortured by police officers who arrested him during the assault on the Mexican embassy in Quito on Friday. The former Vice President appeared on Thursday in the habeas corpus hearing via telematic from the maximum security prison La Roca. From there, Glass recounted what happened on Friday evening on April 5th when the police kidnapped him after breaking into the diplomatic headquarters, violating the Vienna Convention. Glass, who is currently on hunger strike, denounced the many blows he received, pointing out that his ribs were kicked and his thumbs were dislocated. At the hearing, defense attorney Andrés Villegas asked that the arrest be declared illegal and arbitrary and suggested as measure of reparation that the detainee be transferred to a Mexican consular office or to the embassy of another country. In this context, Jorge Glass told how he was beaten and tortured during his detention, where he even had a finger dislocated in an intentional way. Let's listen.
It was not enough for them to throw me against the wall. I hit my head against the wall, and then they started kicking me and kneeing me. I was kicked and kneed in the hips, especially on the right hip, to throw me to the floor. I tried to get away, as is natural, from this barbarity. Then they jumped at me, stepped on my neck, kicked me in the ribs, and one of these guys, masked in black, later told me that he was from there, so that you remember me, and dislocated my left thumb.
In Ecuador, a new violent incident left 3 dead and 2 wounded in the city of Guayaquil, showing that the security crisis persists today despite of the military operations in the context of the international armed conflict. Local media reported that gunmen arrived on motorcycles and opened fire indiscriminately in a park in the southwest of the coastal city, this being the latest in a series of armed attacks that have occurred since the beginning of this year. On January 9th, Ecuadorian President Daniel Noboa declared the existence of an armed conflict in the country that during the Holy Week alone claimed the lives of 137 people. These crimes are taking place in the midst of the so-called Phoenix Plan, an initiative of President Noboa with which he promised to curb insecurity. The measure implies that the military must carry out controls in streets and prisons despite the end of the 90-day state of emergency. In Chile, thousands of people in national strike throughout the country for labor improvements. Thousands of workers throughout Chile participated in various ways in the national active strike, called by the Unitary Central of Workers, CUT, to demand a series of rights and demands, such as wage increases, decent housing, the strengthening of collective bargaining, better pensions, free education, quality health care, and an end to waiting lists, better public safety for work families, and approval of a tax reform that would provide resources for social purposes. According to local media, there were massive marches in Santiago, Valparaíso, Concepción, Antofagasta, and Ovalle, and diverse mobilizations that included Coquimbo, Rancagua, Viña del Mar, and other areas. In this context, David Acuña, president of the Unitary Central of Workers of Chile, stated that they will continue in the streets until the government listens to the demands of the working people.
Today, thank you very much for being here today. Thank you very much for bringing your demands today, for raising your banners, for demonstrating today that the social movement is more alive than ever. Today in Chile there have been thousands of us who have expressed our discontent. What we have said to the parliament, elect you for the workers, for the employers. We warn you that we are alive and united, more united than ever, and for the government to really listen to us, get your act together, get out of the inaction you are in. Today workers, students, settlers, health users, small businessmen who today are here in the streets showing that we have a discontent, that our demands have not been heard, we are building a list, a manifesto which will take our demands to all the political spaces of discussion. We will continue working, we will continue deepening. This is our first action, our first active national strike. We will continue sowing this mobilizing seed, which will lead us to achieve the changes that Chile needs today.
Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Israel continues its siege against the population that has taken shelter in Rafah city, which is supposed to be a safe zone for Palestinians. Our correspondent Nur Harasan brings us more details from the field.
Here in Rafah city, which is supposed to be a green safe zone, however, there is continuous Israeli attacks on this city and in the camps inside this city. According to latest statistics, there is more than 100 displaced people camps inside the city of Rafah, which is now housing more than 1.2 million Palestinian refugees or displaced Palestinians who left their homes from northern Gaza and from Khan Yunis city to the city of Rafah. Their living conditions cannot get any worse, and now as summer approaches, they are suffering this very hot weather with the spread of diseases and infections. Nur Harazin, teleSUR, Gaza.
A UNICEF humanitarian aid convoy was hit by Israeli gunfire while on its way to the northern Gaza to deliver life-saving supplies to children. The organization stated that the incident occurred on Wednesday near the military checkpoint in Wadi Gaza, where the convoy was hit by 3 rounds of gunfire. After the incident, the aid workers decided that they wanted to continue with the mission, but it was impossible for them as the occupying army kept them waiting at the checkpoint for more than 2 hours. The convoy was part of a joint mission of UNICEF and the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, carrying food, medicine and fuel to feed the sanitation and running water systems in Javalia in the north of the Strip.
I was in that car that was hit. It was waiting at a holding point just south of the Wadi Gaza checkpoint, where we are often instructed to wait before being called through the checkpoint. We were waiting there as instructed, and gunfire broke out in the vicinity. It seemed to be coming from the direction of the checkpoint towards civilians, who then turned and fled from the checkpoint. Luckily, myself and my colleagues, we were all safe, but this just underscores how dangerous it is for humanitarian aid workers in Gaza at the moment, that incidents like this continue to happen when they absolutely shouldn't.
UNICEF spokesperson Tess Ingram also noted that at least 23 Gazan children have died from malnutrition at the Kamal Adwan hospital, where the organization headed up to provide nutritional treatments.
It's tragic to see anybody suffering from malnutrition, which is such a painful condition, let alone in a place where malnutrition was almost non-existent before October. And it's now skyrocketed in the north of Gaza because of disruptions to food production, but also because of restrictions on aid access to that area. We've really struggled to get up there with aid. And as a result, we know that children are dying of malnutrition there. At least 23 children have reportedly died at the Kamal Adwan hospital, which is where we were trying to bring these nutrition treatments on Tuesday.
The Israeli army massacred at least 29 Palestinians after a bomb that targeted a house in the Gaza Strip. In addition to the fatalities, dozens of citizens were injured in the attack, targeting a house belonging to the Taba TV family, located in the Daraj neighborhood in the Gaza City's downtown. According to the Health Ministry of Gaza Strip, the Israeli occupation committed 8 massacres in the last 24 hours, claiming the lives of 89 people and injuring 120. Meanwhile, amid the siege, at least 31 Gazans have died from starvation, including 27 children, suffering from malnutrition and dehydration, according to the United Nations, while at least half of the population of the Strip is at risk of imminent famine. Meanwhile, in the occupied West Bank, 2 Palestinians were killed and 3 were wounded by Israeli soldiers. The killings took place at dawn this Friday during an assault by the occupation army in Al-Farah refugee camp and Tubas town. The heavily armed Israeli soldiers stormed the city at dawn for 5 hours and deployed their forces in the streets and alleys. According to Wafa news agency, a Palestinian Red Crescent ambulance was also hit by Israeli fire, while one of its health workers was beaten and arrested by the soldiers. In parallel, there were night military incursions in Tulkarem, Salfit, northwest Nablus, South Jenin and West Hebron. Members of the United Nations Security Council on Thursday failed to reach an agreement on Palestine's application for full membership in the United Nations. Last week, the Palestinians relaunched their 2011 United Nations membership application. The Security Council launched its formal review process within an ad hoc committee of the Council made up of the same member states. At the end of a second closed-door meeting, Vanessa Frazier, ambassador of Malta, who will chair the Council in April, said 2/3 of Council members are in favor of full Palestinian membership, according to diplomatic sources. The vote could take place on April 18th at the initiative of Algeria.
And we sincerely hope, after 12 years since we changed our status to an observer state, that the Security Council will elevate itself to implementing the global consensus on the two-state solution by admitting the State of Palestine for full membership.
We have a final short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience, you can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with teleSUR. Final short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Friday marks 1 year after the so-called forgotten war in Sudan, which has left the country with millions displaced, infrastructure devastated, and a pressing risk of starvation. Sudan is in a catastrophic situation due to a dispute between generals, which for the past year has left, according to aid workers, thousands of victims of sexual and ethnic violence. Fighting began on April 15, 2023, between Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and his one-time number 2, Mohamed Hamdan Daglo, leading the paramilitary rapid support forces, and experts see no end in sight to the conflict. The Northeast African country is experiencing one of the worst humanitarian disasters in recent history and the largest internal displacement crisis in the world, according to the United Nations. In this context, more than 10 million children have been affected by armed conflict, bombings, and various types of lethal violence in Sudan. Human rights organizations have noted that children in the country have witnessed or suffered devastating injuries, death, displacement, psychological damage, and destruction of their homes and communities. They also warn that millions of Sudanese children do not have adequate food and thousands are at risk of dying from diseases. In this context, the World Health Organization reported that more than 3 million Sudanese children under 5 years of age suffer from acute malnutrition, and more than 710,000 children suffer from severe acute malnutrition.
We have a problem with children who have problems with growth and nutrition because they don't eat the right food for them. Most of the food consists of lentils, rice, and sometimes we make lentils with okra. Thank goodness there is now an organization that provides meals, probably composed of food supplements, to children under 5 years old.
After the fighting intensified inside the neighborhoods and innocent people died, there was a security breach and chaos issued among the prisoners. Thanks God we managed to get out after many difficulties. We were controlled by the Quds support forces. They harassed us and insulted us, but finally, we managed to reach the camp. At the beginning everything was very good, but lately it has become very hard, and the organizations are not present. There is a lack of food, and that causes malnutrition.
The president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, assured that the joint space trip with Russia consolidates their relations. The head of state noted that the historic trip of cosmonaut Marina Vasilevskaya to the International Space Station was the beginning of a new level in the relations between Minsk and Moscow. He pointed out that the unfurling of the flags of Belarus and Russia more than 400 kilometers above the surface of the planet symbolizes the fraternal ties between the two peoples. The President Lukashenko also acknowledged the scientific personnel who planned and trained for the space flight. And let's go now to the world of sports. The FIFA and CONMEBOL made the first date of the group stage of the 2030 World Cup official. This took place with the signing of the act of realization of the centenary World Cup at the 78th CONMEBOL Ordinary Congress. The upcoming World Cup will have 3 matches in Uruguay, Argentina and Paraguay, and the rest in Spain, Portugal and Morocco, being the first soccer World Cup played between 3 continents. At the event, the president of CONMEBOL, Alejandro Dominguez, the head of FIFA, Gianni Infantino, Lacalle Pou, president of Uruguay, and Santiago Peña, president of Paraguay, were in charge of signing the intention for Argentina, Uruguay and Paraguay to organize the first matches. Yulimar Rojas, the queen of athletes, will miss the Olympic Games due to an Achilles tendon injury on her left leg. This was confirmed by the world record holder and Olympic triple jump champion, who underwent surgery at the Centro Clinic in Madrid this April 11th and is now successfully recovering from the operation. Iván Pedroso's pupil was saddened at not being able to present Venezuela at the Olympic Games, where her goal was to try to double in the triple jump and long jump to make history with a medal in both disciplines. She thanked the coaching staff and her family and fans who are keeping an eye on her situation and wished the best of luck for the Venezuelan sport delegation in the upcoming Olympics. The Italian Ministry of Culture announces the discovery in Pompeii of a black-walled banquet hall decorated with scenes from the Greek mythology. Located in the region of Campania in southern Italy, this Roman city was buried under meters of ashes after a catastrophic eruption of Mount Vesuvius in year 79 before Christ. The excavation works of the city started around 1748 and only about 45 hectares have been excavated. Nowadays, this site has become a popular tourist destination in Italy. Pompeii is also part of the Vesuvius National Park, declared World Heritage by UNESCO in 1997. We have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram and TikTok. For Telesur English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.